media relations is about building relationships, and if you tick off a reporter by being too aggressive when you're sitting in on an interview with somebody else, it's going to make it much harder for you to have a positive relationship going forward with that reporter. So
social media policy is extremely, extremely important, but it needs to be a guide. It needs to guide the team, or your team members, your employees, or in this case the participants of the Olympics, in the right direction while not being restrictive.
When you're in a crisis situation, the relationships that you build with the media before those crises are going to help you build goodwill during a crisis and thereafter to rebuild your reputation.
The thing that I always try to do when doing crisis work is to identify the symbol, the image that sort of cements itself in the minds of the public around the crisis. There's always a symbol. If you think about, for example, the Exxon Valdez, it's usually dead birds soaked in oil floating up on the shore. If you think about the Ford Explorer Firestone tire problem, it's emergency equipment around an overturned vehicle. Every crisis has these, and if you can identify what that is early in the crisis, then you can work to change or erase that symbol. But once it's locked in, it's going to last. Those things have some real staying power.
Now, those of us in the field of crisis management know that when an incident like this happens where people are hurt, compassion is the #1 message you should have.
I mean, if you're going to apologize, for God's sake, apologize, rather than try and hide it with context. And you see this all the time in a crisis.
If, let's say with airlines, if it's a near miss, it's the communications person or the spokesperson. If it's an accident, then it's the CEO.
Absolutely.
And that's really the difference because you can't have the CEO being out front on things that aren't major.
Agreed. And they shouldn't be, because then it magnifies the crisis. I agree.
Exactly. So that you need to understand that before it ever begins.
Student athletes are going to have these conversations, and if you set up these barriers, they're going to go elsewhere. And so I think one of the things that I believe athletic directors and athletic departments need to recognize is, okay, if you put barriers on Twitter, what's next? Pinterest? Are you going to basically monitor what athletes are going to be able to pin and post on Pinterest? What's next? They're always going to the next platform to find and do the same conversation. So it really is going to be almost like a ongoing and evolving track where we have to keep up with the technologies and be aware of where people are going, but it's never going to be just static in one place.
Yeah, John.
And again, I don't want to overuse the word, but it's relevant, and that's the friction that occurs when someone that maybe they manage a car wreck or maybe a multi-story fire, but then you have something as cataclysmic as a hurricane like Sandy come through. They're in many cases not mentally equipped nor physically equipped to handle that, and if they haven't well greased the mechanism to request state and federal resources, then that's going to be a slow and cumbersome process. And that's not just from search and rescue, but that's also from the utilities and that sort of thing. And I know
what we learned is that if we are expecting power outages, we'll have representatives of the power companies in our emergency operations center from the beginning. Our emergency operations center, just let me talk about that for a moment.
Please.
We have representatives of the state police, the sheriff's office, the DEC. They all have specialized equipment. We have the hospital, the Red Cross, EMS, our fire bureau, and they're all our public works department. Everybody is there with a representative who has communications out to their people.
Tell us again about the relation between the NYPD and the campus police.
Well, because every street and sidewalk in our campus is a public street, there's sort of dual responsibility. Now, obviously, it's our campus security are the first people there. They're the people on the scenes there. That's where they work. But there's a very close communication between the campus security and New York City Police, and many of the officers in our campus security are former New York City police officers and detectives who know their counterparts in the New York City Police Department.
There was a shooting in Binghamton, not at the university, but at the about 15 minutes away, and everybody thought it was at Binghamton. So maybe you could tell us that story and what happened that day. I think you were there, right? You were.
Yes, I was absolutely there. It was a couple of years ago. We got a call in the early part of the around mid-morning time that there had been a shooting at the American Civic Association, which is about 20 minutes away from our primary campus but we do have a presence which is almost across the river from the American Civic Association. And, you know, of course, we connected with our community downtown and made sure that the faculty and staff were safe. And again, as all crises in the initial stages, there's so much confusion, there's so much information going on, and this flow of communication going back and forth between all these agencies, that, you know, finding the truth, getting to the nuggets of the truth is challenging. But our university police, who are university state police, have very close connections with the local police agencies. And because we live, you know, the campus community is part of the Binghamton town, but it's also part of Vestal and neighborhoods around us. So we work with a number of police agencies in the community, and we have good relationships with them. And I think it's so very important for campus security staff to have relationships with their counterparts in the agencies surrounding us. And we actually provided some support to the Binghamton police, which were on site at the American Civic Association as soon as this crisis, you know, began to unfold. And our staff were there to support. They were there to provide whatever supporting assistance they could. Of course, our campus got a lot of calls from media who assumed that this tragedy was happening on our campus. And we, you know, as people were getting in their vehicles from the city and heading up towards Binghamton, our phones started ringing off the hook, because people were saying, well, where can we park our cars? Where can we park our trucks? Where can we put the satellite trucks? And it was, you know, I had to explain to them, listen, the site of the shooting is not on our campus. This is not a campus.
We've been incredibly spoiled in the United States by really almost completely, not completely, but almost complete lack of mass destruction before 9/11. The Oklahoma City bombing being the noted exception to that. But we learned that between Oklahoma City and 9/11 that either crazies in our own population or activists or terrorists in our own population, as well as foreign interest, are going to start making us the kind of battleground, unfortunately, that has long been the case in the Middle East and Europe. I mean,
when it became clear that the story wasn't going away, they issued a subsequent statement, clarified their position, and acknowledged that their goods were in the factory, but made this claim that they were there without their authorization. And, you know, Walmart is a company whose foundational corporate principle is cost reduction through absolute control of supply chain logistics and the production process. So it is a little hard to swallow from Walmart a very convenient claim that they in fact have so little control over their supply chain that they do not even know who is producing their stuff on a given day. And unless they can put forward some evidence that demonstrates that they made a decision to cease doing business with this factory, and that they made that decision because of safety concerns, I don't believe anybody should give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of that claim. Now, that said, even if it is true that they had at some unspecified point told their unspecified local supplier to stop using Tazreen, the reality is they're then responsible for enforcing that order. And if they are if they're managing their supply chain so poorly, notwithstanding their claims to have a very precise and well-managed operation, if they're managing their supply chain so poorly that they're not controlling where the goods are ending up, then that's a problem as well. I mean, their responsibility is to ensure that their goods are being produced in factories where the rights and safety of workers are protected. And if
as Public Information Officer for the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office. That having been said, the challenges that police agencies face are when dealing with a crisis, at least the public information end of things, are pretty significant. You know, different agencies have different responsibilities. For instance, the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office, or sheriff's offices in New York State, the sheriff is the highest elected law enforcement official in that county, and therefore is not only responsible for maintaining order, handling civil processes, maintaining care, custody, and control of inmates at the jail, but has to be elected every 4 years. So he has a number of different constituencies that he has to be held accountable to. And you know, we have many challenges because we not only have to be able to provide information to the people who pay our salary, but we also have to protect the rights of the accused. And one of the things we have to be very, very careful of is not saying things that will place a potential or ongoing prosecution in jeopardy.
To insert a frankly implausible policy idea, putting armed guards in schools, that now lots of people are talking about, if only to say how ridiculous it is. But while they're spending time talking about how ridiculous it is, the NRA is figuring out which Congress people they need to talk to.
But what I wanted to bring up, because I agree with you, Rich, in terms of social media, but there's some special challenges in that. The National Labor Relations Board has issued 3 separate rulings just this spring constraining what employers can do in terms of regulating their own employees' use of social media. Of those decisions, they are very restricting. They basically say that an employee can say almost anything. About all you can require as an employer is to say, these are my opinions, not the opinion of my company. So, and while they were supposed to clarify things, I think the general opinion is that those rulings made things much murkier. So I guess the lesson for companies in terms of social media is to tread carefully and keep very up to date on almost a week-by-week basis with what the NLRB is requiring these days.
They're doing a tremendous job as far as their warning system goes. It's a little more aggressive, I think, basically due to the coverage area as far as the warnings coming out and the microclimates involved with all that. And I'm quite impressed by what's going on there as far as social media wise. And she said Facebook is earlier. She said Facebook is the primary tool that that they're using, and that's such an awesome tool to get to folks nationally, locally, internationally, or globally to get information out in a rapid manner.
If I could just jump in.
If he were to provide information to them that they deemed helpful, it could be reduced to 8 years. 8 years is not going to really help him very much. He's going to be almost as old as we are. And despite the fact that he's Lance Armstrong, he may be able to compete in his Masters. He's not going to win the Ironman. He wants to get it reduced. My opinion is he wants to get it reduced to either time served or such that he could compete in next year's Ironman championship. And, you know, I don't know if that's a possibility. Everything I've read says down to 8 years. My guess is that if he were to really give up information that were to bring down people above him, then they would reduce it to probably a year and let him. I mean, look, Alberto Contador is back riding in the Tour de France. He was caught doping. He never admitted anything, and he's already riding in competing again. So, you know, that's his end game right now.
I completely